Have you ever had the experience where you're making some level of income and you think, if I was making X amount, some higher income level, then I could relax and enjoy life? John D. Rockefeller is famous for this quote where he was asked how much money is enough, and he replied, just a little bit more. I think most of us feel this at some point. Your expenses tend to gravitate up at a pace equal to your income. It's sometimes called lifestyle creep, and in this video, I'm gonna give you a step-by-step strategy for stepping off this treadmill of more. For the vast majority of us, spending increases right along with income. Whether spending is 100% of income, these would be our natural spenders, or 70% of income, which would represent our natural savers. Either way, spending is typically tied to income. As income goes up, spending goes up along with it. And on the surface, this makes sense. As you make more income, you have more money to spend. But I think the Bible would challenge this approach. Paul tells us in 2 Corinthians why God increases our income and wealth. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 10 and 11. Now he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will also supply and increase your store of seed and will enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion, and through us your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. So according to Paul, God increases our income and wealth so that we can be generous with it. And in doing so, we show that money is not our God. We have something better than money in Jesus. Randy Alcorn puts it this way in his book, Money, Possessions, and Eternity. God doesn't make us rich so that we can indulge ourselves and spoil our children, or so we can insulate ourselves from needing God's provision. God gives us abundant material blessing so that we can give it away and give it generously. Okay, so we're called to be generous. That much is clear. But how generous? How much of our income should we give? For many Christians, the standard is the tithe. Give 10% of your income to check your giving box, and the rest is free to spend however you want. But I think we should be thinking about this question differently, because at the end of the day, it's all God's money. That's what stewardship is. We're responsible for using God's money as He would want us to use it. And this perspective is the key in finding contentment with your money, because it flips the question that many Christians, including myself, ask: how much of my money should I give? And instead that question becomes, how much of God's money do I need to keep? Here's Randy Alcorn again. When I grasp that I'm a steward, not an owner, it totally changes my perspective. Suddenly, I'm not asking, how much of my money shall I, out of the goodness of my heart, give to God? Rather, I'm asking, since all of my money is really yours, Lord, how would you like me to invest your money today? When I realize that God has a claim not on a few dollars to throw in an offering plate, not on 10% or 50%, but 100% of my money, it's revolutionary. Suddenly, I'm God's money manager. I'm not God, money isn't God, God is God. He's in His place, I'm in mine, money's in its. Adopting this mindset is a game changer. Rather than looking at the income that's coming in and trying to figure out how much of it you should give, which then means you can spend the rest, instead you think, how much do I need to live what I would consider an adequate lifestyle? What's the annual number that I need? And any income over that is not spent on myself, but it can be given away to enrich the lives of others. I've seen this called a spending finish line, and I really like that framing. It implies that your expenses will be dictated by your income for a time, but then when you hit that finish line, whatever it is, your income and expenses become untethered, and future increases in income will only increase your giving. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't give until you hit this finish line. I think it's crucial to be generous regardless of your income level, but at the finish line, you can really turn up the dial. A big reason we're constantly striving for more money is because we're looking to money for satisfaction and fulfillment. We think that that's the path to the good life. If we have more of it, then we'll be happy and satisfied. Of course, there are those who are truly in poverty and more money really can alleviate a lot of suffering, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about the desire for more luxury and more comfort. And when we look around us, there will always be people who have more than us. Bigger houses, nicer cars, fancier clothes. And so there's always a possibility that we too can have those things if only we could make more income. But a finish line can help you be content with what you have, because there are certain things that just won't be in the cards for you. It takes some of those luxuries off the table. For example, I don't dream of having that $100,000 car because I know I'll never buy one. It's beyond my finish line, and even if my income reaches the level that I could buy it, I've already decided that that extra income gets given away. Now, this might sound depressing, accepting that there are some luxuries that you are intentionally taking off the table. But the reality is, giving produces more satisfaction and joy for the giver than if they had spent that money on themselves. There are several studies that show this, and it shouldn't be surprising for the Christian because this is living in line with God's design. Okay, if you're with me so far, then the next question becomes, how do I actually implement this in my life? What does this mindset look like practically? I'm gonna break this down into 3 steps. First, you need to create a spending plan. Count up your monthly after-tax income and then decide what you want to do with that income. And break it down by category. You'll have your fixed expenses like a mortgage payment or rent, a cell phone bill, loan payments, etc. Then you'll also have your flexible spending categories like groceries, restaurants, entertainment, subscriptions, and on and on. Everybody will have different categories here, but one thing I want to emphasize is that you have to include non-monthly expenses. This is super important. I'm talking about things like auto maintenance, home maintenance, medical expenses, annual credit card fees, personal property taxes, etc. While these expenses don't happen every month, they are guaranteed to happen, and what trips a lot of people up is that they allocate their monthly income to their monthly expenses, but they forget about these non-monthly things, and so when they inevitably happen, they break the budget. So don't let that happen and include them in your spending plan. Once you've got your spending plan laid out, you need to look it over and check for a few things. Are your monthly expenses less than your income? Are you able to give generously at this current lifestyle, or do you need to pull back a bit? Can we call this your spending finish line, or are there other things that you need to add in order to call this your finish line? And be careful here. If you're saying that your current lifestyle is not adequate, make sure that you're not just stepping back on that treadmill of more. There will always be ways that you can upgrade your lifestyle, but at some point you have to say, this is enough. When I went through this, I did this exact thing. I looked at my family's spending and thought of all the ways I'd like to upgrade our lifestyle before calling it good. It'd be nice to go out to eat a little bit more, maybe take an extra trip each year. So really I was saying the same thing as John D. Rockefeller. How much do I need? Just a little bit more. Thankfully, my wife called me out on it, but it's a really easy trap to fall into. Once you have this laid out, the second step is to track your spending. You have to make sure that you're sticking to the spending plan and the finish line that you laid out. Now, my favorite tool for this is YNAB, and I have another video talking about how I use YNAB to implement and track a spending plan, so I'll link to that video in the description. The last step is to make adjustments along the way. Your first pass at a spending plan is not going to be very accurate. You'll find areas where you're spending more than you thought and others that are less than expected. So refine this as you go to reflect something that's realistic and achievable. And life circumstances will probably move your finish line from time to time. For example, if you don't have kids now, your finish line will likely move when you have kids. And the reverse is also true. If you're in the midst of it now, when the kids are eventually on their own, you won't need as much as you do now. So with a finish line, as your income goes up, your spending at some level no longer does, and the gap is all given away. The irony is that when you no longer look to money to provide you the good life, and instead you look to God, you may actually find satisfaction and flourishing. I think this quote from C.S. Lewis in his book Mere Christianity summarizes it nicely. I do not believe that one can settle how much we ought to give. I am afraid the only safe rule is to give more than we can spare. In other words, if our expenditures on comforts, luxuries, amusements, etc. is up to the standard common among those with the same income as our own, we are probably giving away too little. If our charities do not at all pinch or hamper us, I should say they are too small. There ought to be things that we should like to do and cannot do because our charitable expenditure excludes them. So if you want to put a finish line in place, you need to track your spending plan. So check out my video on YNAB next. And if you're serious about biblical stewardship, then make sure you subscribe because I'll be back in the next video giving you more tips to be a good steward. See you then.